all right. What is up, you people? How is it going? Hope you guys are having a good week, good day so far. Welcome to Midnight Hatter Live, the weekly variety show where we do some Gundam, we do some gaming. Today we are going to get knee-deep in some Gunpla because we haven't done that in a while. You know, the last couple weeks we've been talking about, Gundam lore and that type of stuff, and that's been fun, but, it's time to get back to basics and do some hobby stuff. So I have some exciting things to show you today, and I hope you guys are excited about it. I do not have my esteemed co-host with me, so do let me know if the audio is sounding wonky. I don't have my audio engineer with me today, but yeah, I see we've got some of our regulars in the chat: Zeonic Shadow, Talos, Johnny Tacoma, Dan. Hope you guys are all doing well. Thank you for joining me today. So yeah, we've done this little project before where we've cast some parts in resin and, tried to mix things up with different additives and stuff. Today we're going to be using a different method, different materials that I've not tried yet, and hopefully, using some lessons learned, we can apply those techniques here and get the result that we're looking for, because I've had, this has been a long time coming trying to get this stuff to work. But before we get into that, part of the reason that I'm really committed to doing this technique is because I had been waiting on this pre-order to arrive. I honestly was not expecting, but here we are. We've got the Zaku 2 High Mobility Surface Type from Gundam The Origin, Kukuru's Doan's Island. This is the Selma Levens custom. This has to be my favorite of the Zaku land types from that OVA, the Kukuru's Doan's Island, because she's got the bazooka as well as one of those heat knives. I did like the sniper rifle type a little bit, but he doesn't come with the heat knife. And so if this technique works, we are obviously going to be making some resin copies of this heat knife because, who doesn't need heat knives that light up? It's pretty cool. Now, I do want to address something because I did see someone on Discord pointed out that a P-Bandai kit is just paying a lot of extra money for a fancy box. I got to tell you, the boxes of P-Bandai, that tells you somebody that has never had a P-Bandai kit, because the boxes are the least interesting thing about P-Bandai kits. Just for comparison's sake, Shirtlad sent me this guy here, this Hobby Hyzak version AOZ, and I gotta tell you, the box art on this guy looks way cooler than any P-Bandai kit I've ever had. In fact, some of the P-Bandai kits just look, the packaging anyway just looks terrible. But you know me, I love my Zaku variants, and I'm gonna be excited to build both of those guys. Let me know in the chat what you guys think I should do, with that Zaku surface type. Should I just go straight Selma colors and do the Southern Cross logos and stuff, or should I put some different decals on it and mix it up? Now, today I will be wearing gloves because I have made that mistake in the past where I've gotten resin all over my hands, and we don't want to be doing that today. So we're going to take proper precautions, and yeah. So that's one vote for no custom. Just keep it straight build. And I'm inclined, especially given the rarity of P-Bandai kits, I am always inclined to not customize a P-Bandai, because then you kind of lose the opportunity to just have a straight build, right? Unless you buy two of them, right? So let's see, other interesting stuff that I've got going on. I'm gonna switch over here to my table camera now that I look like I'm a proctologist. I'm gonna switch to my screen share here so that you guys can see some stuff. Obviously, I've got my mold already made. We made this out of Oyamaru, so it's gonna be, a reusable, it's a temporary mold as opposed to a permanent silicone mold. Now, I did want to show off these guys. I put up a poll on Patreon a few days ago, asking what you guys wanted to see some STLs of, and one of the overwhelming results was people wanted to see some 1700th scale fleet parts. This one obviously has a few flaws with it. For one thing, you can see that kind of it sloped down a little bit, and I did drop it, so a couple of the little detailed parts broke off as I was painting. But this is a 1/1700th scale Salamis class, and then we've also got a 1/1700th scale Musai here. Got the little Komusai capsule in the front there. Got our mega particle cannons, and I started painting these guys, but I never got around to finishing it, mostly because, do you guys have any idea how small a 1/1700th scale mobile suit is? Like, let me see if I can get this with my tweezers here. This is a Rick Dom for scale. I mean, that's absurdly small. But if that is if that's what people want as far as the next Patreon perk for the Principality of Polygons, links in the description if you guys are interested in checking that out. That is what we are going to do. I'm going to put out a little set, little two-piece set. Comes with a Musai, a Salamis, and a few 1/1700th scale mobile suits to go with it. Yeah, let me know in the chat which mobile suits you guys would like to see with these guys. And the reason I chose these ones is because it's really easy to get your hands on like a 1/1700th scale Argama or White Base or Albion. So, a lot of these standard ships, I know that they make model kits of the Musai and the Salamis, but they're a little harder to come by. So it might be easier to just 3D print them. And then you also get mobile suits, because that's the other thing, is it's actually hard to find 1/1700th scale mobile suits to go with your tiny fleet. So I don't know, maybe I'll build a fleet diorama or something. I've got enough pipe dream projects to work on that we probably don't need to be adding anything more to that stack. So that said, we have done this project before. Like I said, I've got a full video where we make some resin copies of Heat Hawks, and got copies here. And in fact, it does. So this one, I included some of that neon pigment paint, and that's why you get that bright yellow, and it lights up in UV light, which is pretty cool looking. Now, it actually does retain some of that light. I don't know if I'm going to be able to show this on camera because of just the lights going on in here, but it does continue to glow after it is, after you've exposed it to UV light, which I think is pretty cool. So basically, we are trying to achieve this effect, but without having it be in this bright, neon color. Obviously, you could paint this, but the problem is if you paint it, then you're gonna get rid of the glowing effect. So if I were to paint this one, I would probably mask it off to where just the blade was visible, and then paint it the rest of it black. Because if you were to do that, then if you paint the whole thing black and you were to have like the cool version of the axe, then it wouldn't glow anymore. So my objective here is this mold is of a Goof Custom heat sword. We're going to try and put some black pigment ink in there along with this stuff. This is our glow-in-the-dark pigment powder. As you can see, it's a white powder that glows red and then retains some of that glow. So if we can put enough of this stuff and enough black ink into our resin, hopefully we can get like a nice charcoal gray colored part that also glows. And, we paint the handle black so that it, the handle doesn't have to glow. But the objective here, and, could we do this with LEDs? Yes, but I tend to reserve LEDs for parts that actually light up, things like beam sabers, things that really emit their own light. The glowing effect with the heat weapons in Gundam isn't really like a light effect, right? So, and if we can do that, then I'll start making copies of like some IBO weapons. These things would look really sick if we were to get that same glowing effect going on. So let me know in the chat if there are any sort of weapons you'd like me to make copies of here. And we are going to go right into it because this is a quick cure resin that we're going to be using today. It cures in about 10 minutes, but with the alcohol ink and the pigment powder in it, I don't know where we're going to be at. So, you know, I just want to make sure that we give ourselves enough time to see the final product before the end of the stream. So first things first, I'm going to grab out some cleaning materials here. And while we wait for these things to cure, obviously we can chat about some other things. Yeah, that's a good sound. If you let this stuff sit around too long, it tends to crystallize and then it's no good to use anymore. So you got to definitely be diligent about, you know, keeping this stuff well maintained. And of course, you know, I always go to my new favorite resin casting expert, Robert Talone. You know, he's the one that I learned about, you know, environmental moisture. So if you don't cap these things properly and moisture gets into your resin, then you're going to be looking at some foamy, messy resin. You really don't want any ambient water getting into this stuff. It's important to cap it really well. An MS-sized claymore sword. Yeah, we could definitely do something like that. So what I'm going to do is just cap that so that we do not have any of that, like I said, ambient moisture creeping in. Because this cup is going to be the one that let me pull my camera out here so you guys can see what we've got. So we've got our part B, or no, this is the part A. The actual resin is in this cup, and we have it capped so that we don't, you know, let in too much ambient moisture. And then we've got our part B over here, which is going to be what we mix our pigments and our glow-in-the-dark powder with. And I am just using the line at the bottom of this paper cup to measure, you know, the A and B part equally. I actually have a dump cup, or well, I have a dump mold over here to my right. So this is obviously going to be way too much for this tiny little sword. I have this dump cup over here, and this is, you know, this is something I recommend to anybody who's doing this type of work, is always have like a dump mold that you can pour your extra resin in so that you're not being a Wendy wasteful. In this case, it's actually a really large dump mold, so I'll be able to probably dump multiple, I'll probably be able to dump multiple cups worth of resin in there, because this stuff's expensive. You don't want to waste it. I'm going to do a couple of spoonfuls of our powder here. This stuff does not go a very long way, as you might have seen. I'm not sure exactly how much I put into that, that heat hawk, but you see how it barely holds a charge. And this stuff does degrade over time, so bear that in mind if you do decide to purchase this stuff. Now we are also going to be mixing in our black alcohol ink. This stuff also does not go a very long way, I have learned, in making some of our other molds. So we are going to add, I mean, this thing is going to look jet black when I mix it up, but I guarantee you when it cures, it's going to turn like a charcoal gray. And that's okay. You know, I don't need it to be jet black. The objective here is to create the illusion of like a metal Mixing it up with our handy dandy silicone stirring stick. And again, the alcohol ink serves two purposes because it reduces the surface tension of the resin and therefore will reduce the bubbles in the final product, which is a good thing. And just to test this out, I want to see. So obviously you can see that under the UV light, we get that red glow. And it does retain a bit of that color. Yeah, I think that this is going to work out quite nicely. And hopefully we can get a couple of pours here. Only 16 minutes in. I think we're going to give this like a solid 20-minute cure while we wait. Obviously, I'm over here making a mess. All right. And now we are going to combine our A part and B part. See how this goes. It's all about trying to achieve the perfect custom Gunpla effects. Another important thing to note is that this particular resin, although it kind of mixes clear, it cures in like a bright white. So I didn't have to add any white pigment. I do have just like a plain white pigment for if you're using clear resin. It's part of that set that I bought. All right, now since this side has the deeper recess, that's the side we're going to pour into first. As always, I am going to make a huge mess. Actually, that's not too bad for my standards. I am going to put a little bit in our top here. I don't want to use too much. I know that it's going to... Oop, little... See, there we go. Trying to be cute with it. Ended up making more of a mess. I think that that's going to be enough to fill the mold. This stuff does expand as it cures too. And then we've got our dump cup over here. Or I keep saying dump cup. I meant dump mold. I can already feel this resin heating up, so that's a good sign. You know what I'm actually gonna do? Well, I want to save that spoon. Let's see. I'll use a toothpick to kind of smear this around into the top half of the mold. Make sure that it kind of gets in some of those details. Then we are just going to make a little sandwich here. Probably ought to put something kind of heavy on this so that it will, so we get a good casting. Wipe up some of my mess here. I hope that this stays, that this charcoal gray. I hope that it doesn't lighten up as it cures, because if so, we're going to have a much whiter part than I'm really looking for. Another thing to note, and this is kind of a weird quirk of working with these two-part resins, is that the larger and denser your part is, the faster it actually cures. It's kind of counterintuitive. You would think like, oh, a small mold, thin part, that should, cure pretty quickly. It's actually the opposite. This will take longer to cure than the cup that I just dumped out in this mold here. And again, I'm going to paint that anyway, so it doesn't really matter if it's, if it's got a little glow effect or if it's got some pigment to it, that's not going to be a problem. Just clean up a little bit here. And now the waiting game. Yeah, exactly. We are making a mess. But yeah, so a guts style sword, yeah, that would actually be pretty cool. I actually just stumbled upon a 3D model of the cockpit from the Gundam Mark II. And so I was thinking of maybe, 3D printing that cockpit and then maybe like an Emma figure or a Camille figure to sit in it, and like, I think that'd be pretty cool. But yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff that I've been 3D printing lately. I think my hands are clean enough that I can move some of this stuff out of the way. For instance, making more of a mess. I've got some MMP-80 machine guns, the Zaku machine gun that comes with the Zaku 2 F2 type. Now this is so there are two, okay, let me rewind here. So you guys might be aware that both the Zaku Kai and the Zaku 2 F2 have an MMP-80. The Zaku 2 Kai has the underbarrel grenade launcher on its MMP-80 compared to the F2, which does not have said grenade launcher. So I've actually 3D printed both versions, and actually I have one with a folding stock here. So we've got the folding stock version. So this is actually the MMP-80 that comes with the Zaku 2 F2 kit in both the Xeon or the Federation colors. So the scaling is, I think, perfect. The model looks pretty good. It's pretty sweet. And then above here, this is the MMP-80 that is used by the Zaku Kai. It's a little bit wider, has like a, just a different design. Yeah, the camphor shotguns would make a cool print. This is the raw print without any paint on it. You can kind of see the details. For some reason, the 3D model, I think that I messed up some of the normals when I was making it, because the 3D model does have this area filled in. There's a plane there, but when I printed it, it actually printed, kind of hollow, like you can see right through it. That's kind of weird. But everything else about it looks really good. Now, before this is ready to share with you guys, I do need to scale down the handle, because the handle's a little too, the width of it is perfect. It's about, I want to say it's like 1.2 millimeters wide, but the depth, I guess, of the handle is a little too wide, because, and I will show you here, I've got a Zaku 2 kit here, the high grade Zaku 2, and it doesn't quite fit in the hand very well. Now, if you compare that to, say, one of these F2 MMP80s, that guy fits in perfectly. Now, I am not going to equip these guys with any kind of pegs or anything that would hold the weapon in place. And the reason for doing that is because I wanted it to be able to be equipped by a variety of kits. I didn't want... The problem is, if I were to add that peg, that little slotted peg that goes into the F2, then it's only compatible with the F2. It kind of defeats the purpose of printing all of these weapons, So, I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. If there's a alternative version that you would like to see, like maybe if I were to have swappable peg joints, like maybe there's just a hole in the handle, and then you can put different sized peg joints into that hole, and I'll obviously provide those at least for all of the kits that I have that could theoretically be using an MMP80. That would be an interesting way to handle it for sure. Let's see. MS-sized Dylan minis. I assume you meant Delanza. Yeah, I need to get myself a proper airbrush. I still have that, like, it's like a makeup airbrush, which is cool. It's I figure if it's good enough to spray makeup on a face, it's probably good enough for scale modeling. But I think that something a little nicer would be the way to go. Let me make sure we've got this. Just checking in my dump mold, and it's a little hardened, but we probably need to give it another 5 minutes. Another common misconception from the Discord that I wanted to address is, on the subject of things like polycaps. And this came up as a result of, the conversation around the leaked, well, they say leaked, maybe hacked. I don't know. I don't know what the real story is, but of the Rising Freedom Gundam from the Gundam Metaverse files, you really can't just 3D print Gunpla kits without using a variety of materials. And the reason I say that is because most of the joints of model kits are, just probably rubbed resin in my mustache. Most of the joints in Gunpla model kits use polycaps. Now there was a rumor that most high grades don't use polycaps anymore, and that's technically true. There are some kits that don't technically have polycaps. For instance, since we've got Zeonic Shadow in the chat here, I can tell you that, like, the Bondoc or Bound Doc does not have traditional polycaps. What it does have is one of the runners is a different material. It's that ABS-like plastic instead of the, hard, brittle plastic that most kits are made out of. And it has that kind of gripping texture that a polycap would. So there are kits that kind of employ that method, that use like an ABS type plastic for certain runners. Now, that said, I can tell you, just because I've read the instruction manual, the Selma Land Battle Zaku does include a polycap sheet, like a traditional PC, charcoal gray polycap sheet. But if you were going to 3D print model kits, I would say that you need two types of resin to print with. You need your standard photo, UV resin to print the larger parts. And then you would want some ABS-like, or they actually make rubber-like resin. I would probably go for the rubber-like resin. The ABS-like resin is a little firmer, but it doesn't have that grippy texture that a polycap does. So yeah. just something to bear in mind. You know, a lot of the older kits, like the no grade kits, didn't have poly caps either, and the joints on those are just kind of like loosey goosey. I think that it's worth having that different material as part of the kit in order to get your posability and just to have a nice tight fit, without having like a brittle plastic. Um, and I think that that's the reason that a lot of garage kits are not super great, because, you know, they just either they cast everything all in the same resin or they print it all in the same resin. And so you have great details, but you know, the actual moving parts and the joints don't work the way that they should. And I learned this when I started following Techo Toys on Instagram, and I actually bought some of the is it 135th? I think it's the 135th scale mechs. They have ball joints on them, and some of the 3D prints that I did using the standard photopolymer resin, UV resin, those are so brittle that just putting the ball joint into the part would snap it. So, you know, the first batch that I printed all broke apart. Now, I did start using some ABS like resin, so it was a little tougher, but the posability was kind of limited because it was like kind of scratchy the way that it would move around in the joint. Now, I am looking to get my hands on some rubber like resin and, you know, experiment with printing using that, at least certain parts. Like I would print the ball joint itself in that softer, grippy rubber like resin, and then maybe, you know, the torso part that has the socket for the ball joint, I would print that in the standard UV resin. So, just some things to bear in mind. You know, I'm learning this stuff as I go every day, so just always willing to share what I've learned. Let's see what we've got here. Yep, this is nice and hard. So we're going to pull this mold apart. We're going to see what happened. I don't know how well it's going to have worked. The good news is this... So this is still pretty pliable. So we'll be careful when removing it from the mold. I'm a little concerned that it'll be easy to remove the flashing. That'll be nice. Okay. So that is pretty good looking heat sword. Don't have any bubbles or anything to speak of. A lot of flashing, but we expected that. And it will be easy to remove this flashing while the part is not fully cured. Now, it did end up curing a lighter color than I would have liked. But, you know, this is my first time doing it, so. If we can get a second casting done on stream, I will definitely be adding a lot more black pigment to it. And again, like I mentioned earlier, that alcohol in the pigment is going to slow down the cure time. So, and again, this is all about, you know, just trying to like level up your Gunpla. And show you guys some alternative methods of doing these things. You know, not everything has to be like permanent painted. You can have these types of, you know, if you have cool, you know, whether it's heat reactive or light reactive materials, find ways to incorporate that stuff into your builds, because it's just going to make them much more unique. You know, anybody can do, like, well, I say anybody. I am not great at object source lighting, but, you know, there's no shortage of Gunpla builders that will show you, you know, the same techniques over and over and over. And granted, there's a reason that they're the same techniques over and over, is they work, they look good. You know, using water slide decals, using LEDs. And I've definitely gotten much Well, you know, now that I have experimented using LEDs, it's a lot easier than I thought it was. And so I enjoy using them. But again, it's all about using the right method for the right application. And I don't think that LEDs are the way to go for heat weapons. That is just my personal opinion. And hopefully being exposed to the air is going to help this cure a little bit more as well. Now, real test here. See if we can apply some of this UV light to the weapon. See what kind of glowing we get. So definitely not as vibrant as I would like to see. And it looks like we had some areas where it didn't quite mix all the way through. I don't know if that picks up on camera. I mean, it looks cool, kind of, when it's under the UV light, but I think we can do a lot better. And again, I think that the real problem with this is that the pigment powder and the alcohol ink just do not go very far. I want to try and gently remove this because, as you can see, it is still super floppy. But if we lay it flat, we can restore its shape. Alright, so let's try this again. Hopefully we can make this thing work. Got my trusty supply of cups. Alright. Now I'm also wondering if maybe we need to mix our pigments into the A part instead of the B part. So let's try that. Because you never know. You really never know what is going to work out better for you. So you try it. Now this is this 2-part resin, this smooth cast, it's the 65, no, this is the 320. The smooth cast is a product that I've used a lot in the past, mostly because I like the speed of it. It does make it a little tricky to work with because you have limited time to work with it. You know, you've got like a 3-minute pot life. So you really have to move to get it done once you have got it mixed. But I like having the instant results. I like having yeah. I like the convenience of it. There are other resins that are maybe better. You know, slower curing resins obviously will usually result in less bubbles. I'm going to do 3 heaping spoonfuls of this powder. I might just give it a little dump action. Oh, cheers, Robert. Add our pigment. Again, I used a whole lot. Silicone stir stick, awesome because just break off the stuff that sticks to it. We don't want any of this stuff getting into our new mold. Might just use the other end. All right, so the variables we have tweaked. We are mixing our pigments in the A part instead of the B part of our resin. We are also using much more of both the alcohol ink and the pigment powder, so hopefully we are going to achieve more glow. Let's see what we've got so far. Oh no. Doesn't look super promising on the glow front. Let's... I suppose there's no such thing as too much, right? You can only add too little. We're going to give this thing a very thorough mixing before we add in the second half of our resin. And I can almost guarantee that this is not going to be fully cured by the time the stream is up. So I'll have to post a short later. Later on this afternoon, I will post the results of this experiment, but you guys get to watch it here live. Here we go. Part B, going in. Let's scrape the sides of the cup. Make sure we get every last drop. And again, we are not being wasteful here because I still have plenty of room in my dump mold. So all of this resin is going to be used. And again, that alcohol ink does such a remarkable job of preventing bubbles from forming in this stuff, which is awesome. Pop that guy in there. And let's do our pour. Man, I'm gonna have to like scrape my cutting mat here. I probably need a new cutting mat anyway, which means I'm gonna need to re-up on my sticker game. All right, that looks good. Again, apply a couple of drops, top half of the mold, just to catch the little details in there. Oh man, that cup is warming up real quick. I'm actually surprised because typically alcohol will slow that curing process down. And I don't think we've caught any bubbles, which is a great sign. Let's just go ahead and dump this now. And let's go ahead and make ourselves a little sword sandwich. I did use my typical method of making this Oyumaru mold where we made like a little Lego box. And I can already see that the ink is much darker on this, so that also is promising. As far as glow goes, got plenty of glow on the on the mold and on the cutting mat. Not so much on the part, but you know, we can always use a much more powerful UV light than this little guy to charge it up, or just leave it in daylight. That always works really well as well. You know, come to think of it, I've got a much more powerful black light down here on the ground. It's what I used to charge this guy up before the stream. And so let's see if we charge it up on there. Actually, a little trick of the trade here as far as cleaning up your mess. Balling up everything in your glove. And there we go. Everything is all neatly packaged. So that's that. I'm gonna wait for, wait for this heat sword, the first one, to charge up here on the black light and see if we can get that thing to turn up good. And then yeah, this guy, like I said, I'm not gonna rush it. I don't want to take it out after only 13 minutes. We've only got 13 minutes left together. I don't want to rush it and take it out and it be, floppy and uncured. So I'm going to pull it out this afternoon. I'll record like a little YouTube short, maybe a little Instagram reel, something like that, to show you guys what the final product looked like. And yeah, we'll see if these methods work or if we need to go back to the drawing board. I do think that this black alcohol ink is a lot better than previous attempts where we just used acrylics. And again, the reason that the acrylics failed is because by introducing a water-based acrylic ink into our parts, it causes the resin to foam. And that means you get bubbly parts and they don't look good. And it's actually a surprise to me that these ones didn't have more bubbles in them, considering that the UV pigment inks that I've used in the past, these I think are an acrylic paint. Don't recall. It doesn't say directly on here. But this stuff is cool. Obviously, it makes for some really cool parts. Unfortunately, like I said, it's it's temperamental. It's not as easy to work with. I have had success in mixing this with acrylic paints as opposed to just mixing it into resin parts. Well, I mean, I guess you could technically say that the resin parts were a success. But yeah, it's just a question of the mixing it with the resin. And so maybe the answer would be, and I'll try this, if this experiment fails, this is what we're going to do. We're going to mix some of this neon pigment paint, because obviously I don't get the same foaming problem with the resin and the pigment paint. So if we mix some of this with some of the glow powder and also some of the black ink, maybe we can get that effect that we're looking for. Because in miniature application, I was able to create the effect of the glowing blue Master Sword on a Link Legend of Zelda miniature. That guy, I took some silver paint and this blue neon paint, mixed it together, and so you get that blue glow coming from what is normally a silver sword. So I know that it works in certain applications. It's just a matter of tweaking the process and refining the mixture of materials to get it to do what I want here. Yeah. Now, another important point, I guess, to bring up is that with these alcohol inks, they are what I would call semi-permanent. And this is, again, something I learned from watching Robert Talone, is, you can cast parts with this dye in them, but over time, the color is going to fade. They're going to turn, if it's a white part, it's going to turn yellow. If it's a bright red, I find that reds are typically the worst offender. Is a red dyed part will turn pink over time. I don't know how light the black ink will get over time, but it's worth noting that, because painting your resin parts, whether they're 3D printed or whether they are cast in 2-part resin, painting them is always going to look better than using the dyed plastic. Just something to bear in mind. So, while we can achieve some cool effects, painting it is going to, be a lot longer lasting. So, there you have it. Now, I think that this guy has been sitting on the charger here for long enough. No glow. No glow off this guy. I am thoroughly disappointed. I mean, we get like... And again, you see how it's like spotty because it wasn't mixed entirely. Still a little bit of flashing that I need to break off of here. So I'll be curious to see whether the one that has much more pigment added, and whether adding it to the A part of the resin instead of the B part will prove to be more successful. I will say that the A part of the resin is a little bit thinner, so maybe it'll be easier to mix with. We'll see. But yeah, overall, I'm kind of pleased with it. Doesn't need a whole lot of cleanup, honestly. And I can already tell that it's stiffened up since we pulled it out of the mold. So it's still curing, but it's going to cure straight and brittle the way that we want it to. So that's the objective, is to find a way to make this do this. All right. Well, again, we're going to see the results of this experiment after the stream has ended, but I appreciate you guys hanging out with me while we do the thing live, and hopefully you have learned from my mistakes and you can engage in some of these exciting experiments on your own. Again, like I said, it's all about just leveling up your Gunpla, doing cool stuff that not everybody else is doing, and, I'm going to be working on getting these kind of processes refined to a point where I can, repeat these results effectively. And, if you guys are interested, I'll set up shop and ship you guys some glow-in-the-dark parts. They're not too expensive to make, so let me know again in the chat what what sort of experiments you'd like to see going forward. And I heard like a guts sword. I heard master grade scale stuff, so we can obviously do stuff like that. Yeah, I definitely want to incorporate as many of these little neat gimmicks into the stuff that I share with you guys as I can. Hey, what's going on, Shirtlad? I see you in the chat there. I'm glad that the new Gundam Breaker marathon is over. I don't know why you'd subject yourself to that, but but yeah, so I'll probably go ahead and call the stream early. Like I said, we're not going to be able to see this guy anyway. And if you guys haven't, definitely check out the latest episode of Dissecting Gundam that I posted on Friday. I do want to get back in the habit of having a Dissecting Gundam release every month. And I also do want to record just a brief short kind of following up with last episodes, because we did have some interesting little character tidbits with Rekoa, especially at the end there, that, I didn't mention. So, I was primarily focused on the Camille character development there. And then, of course, the question of who is Margarita and why is she so important? So, yeah, that said, yeah, definitely check out the last episode if you haven't. And, obviously go check out Adam's stuff. That stuff's down in the description below as well. And if you're interested in getting some of the STLs for these 1/1700th scale, fleets, check out the link to the Patreon below. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Hope you have a good rest of your day. Cheers.